Okay, so let's get started. We're going to be taking a look at editing keystrokes available in our Motec M1 software. We want to work with and learn our keystrokes to be as efficient as possible when we're calibrating and tuning. This is definitely going to be something that you want to get used to and familiar with. I use these keystrokes all the time, and it definitely makes me a lot more efficient, again, calibrating and tuning. So let's jump in here and take a look at some of the basic keystrokes and why you want to learn them. I'm going to be demonstrating in our engine efficiency table here, our lambda table, and our ignition timing table. So we're going to take a look at a couple different examples here using these keystrokes and just seeing why and when we'd want to use them. The very first keystroke I want to demonstrate is going to be very basic, simple. It's going to be using the keystroke G. So if we just type G here while we're clicked onto any table, that's going to allow us to toggle between the normal table view, as we see right here. So we see all the data points plotted, we see our breakpoint axes. This will flip over to the three-dimensional view so we can see what that looks like in this particular view. And we can just go here back and forth with our cursor to be able to flip back and forth and take a look at that three-dimensional profile. Or if we click G again, that's going to give us a split screen, allowing us to see the calibrated data in the table and then what that looks like plotted here in this graphical format. Now, the reason why we want to take a look at what the 3D plot is of our data here, we want to make sure this is going to be nice and smooth. There's not going to be a lot of peaks and valleys within the table. This is really important because our engine efficiency table represents the estimated cylinder filling of our engine as it's operating. So we're going to get into exactly what the engine efficiency, volumetric efficiency table represents in a dedicated tutorial, but just know that the table should be relatively smooth shape as we're finding right here. So using the G key is definitely going to be very beneficial. So as you're doing your calibrating and tuning, you can just flip back and forth here and take a look at any point in time. So if I click here in the lambda aim table, we can take a look at what this looks like. Now, it's not really that important in terms of having a nice smooth table for the lambda aim, but we can use that functionality here. Same thing with the ignition timing. We can go here and flip back and forth and take a look, just pan around and see what that looks like plotted graphically. So that is going to be something to definitely keep in mind as you're working within the software. Okay, the next thing I want to take a look at here is reversing our axes on the actual table. So whatever table we're clicked on here, and this is going to be a two-dimensional axis here, so we have inlet pressure and we have engine speed. We're able to reverse our axes depending on what we want to go and flip around here. So for example, let me just demonstrate the inlet manifold pressure. You may be more accustomed and used to working with the engine vacuum, so this would be the inlet manifold pressure here being at something like 30 or 40 kPa. You might be more familiar or comfortable with looking at your vacuum here in the upper portion of the table. In order to flip-flop our axes, we're going to be using the keystroke here, and we'll go ahead and use the Y keystroke. That's going to go ahead and flip up our inlet manifold pressure. So the table is the same, it's just reversed the way we're looking at the table now. So now, if we scroll up to the top here, we have our engine vacuum at the top portion of the table, and then our inlet manifold pressure here as it's getting into positive manifold pressure at the bottom portion of our table. It's really up to you how you want to look at the table. I usually leave it on the default, which we can see then would be manifold pressure down here being in vacuum, and then the manifold pressure ascending as we get up into positive manifold pressure into boost. And we can do the same thing with our engine axes here and engine speed axes. We can see we can flip-flop this in the same exact manner as our inlet manifold pressure. All we need to do in this case is click X as we're clicked on the table, and we can see that's going to flip around our table. Now, I typically don't work with flipping the engine speed axes. I like to look at it from left to right rather than right to left, but this is going to be your choice, and we can just use the X button to flip it around. Same thing with the lambda aim table. We can do the same thing, flip that around, or do that with the Y. I usually work with the default axes set up here, going from lower inlet manifold pressure and going higher, and engine speed going from lower to higher, ascending from left to right. So you can switch this around, and you're able to do that very quickly with those keystrokes, so keep that in mind. Now, the other thing, as we're speaking in terms of just generality on our tables here, so for example, engine efficiency or lambda aim, we are able to access the breakpoints in our table to edit them. So we can see here the breakpoints in our table: 0, 500, 750, 1000, inlet manifold pressure, 30, 40, 50, 60. We can change our breakpoint scaling. We'll talk about that in future training tutorials, but in order to access any of our breakpoint scaling, or to maybe even turn on another axis to our table. So we have two axes here. We can actually turn on a third axis in some cases. We'll click A. A allows you to go in here and change any of your breakpoints. As we can see here, we have the breakpoints all the way out here to 40 total breakpoints for engine speed. If we click on inlet manifold pressure, we can see that we're able to go out to 24 total breakpoints. So we're able to go ahead and manually edit them if we like, or we can do a generate function, allowing us to do that rescaling option. We'll cover this again in another training module, when and why we want to go ahead and change our breakpoint axes, but the A keystroke allows you to flip into your breakpoint axes and take a look at some of this background information. Now, I did go ahead and mention the X and Y inverse or reverse button. That's going to be going ahead and allowing you to switch the axes here in this menu as well, but you can do that keystroke with the X and Y as we just discussed. Now, there is a third axis available that we could turn on for this table, and this is ambient pressure. This is essentially our barrel pressure. We can do further correction in our engine efficiency based on ambient pressure that's available in this firmware package. I'm not going to turn that on right now. We'll discuss that at a later point in time. But again, you can access this information from the axis setup, clicking the A button. So definitely something to keep in mind. Let's go ahead and close that out. Okay, so now that we've talked about some generality, looking at our tables here and just using some basic keystrokes, let's move on to some editing keystrokes that we definitely want to know and keep in mind. Now, the one that I use the most frequently is going to be my math function. I'm going to demonstrate this in the engine efficiency.
Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here, and you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.